My God, this incredible HFY masterpiece found you today. Witness the legend, starting now.
The Nexus Prime station orbited the diplomatic heart of the Galactic Consortium like a chrome-plated monument to interspecies cooperation, which was really just a fancy way of saying, look how civilized we are compared to those barbaric humans. The station's sleek corridors hummed with the quiet efficiency of 1,000 different species working in perfect harmony, assuming you ignored the subtle hierarchy that placed humans somewhere between custodial staff and decorative plants. Zara Kellick found this arrangement endlessly amusing. She sat at her workstation in the Cultural Liaison Office, a department that existed primarily to make the consortium feel progressive while ensuring humans stayed in their designated corner of the galaxy. Her official title was Terran Integration Specialist, which sounded important enough to justify her presence, but vague enough that nobody questioned what she actually did. The truth was delightfully simple. She translated human swear words into polite diplomatic language and occasionally explained why humans insisted on eating food that was still moving. Today's assignment involved reviewing trade agreements between Earth and the Veltani Republic, a task about as thrilling as watching paint dry in a vacuum. The Veltani, with their elongated necks and perpetually condescending expressions, had graciously agreed to purchase human curiosities. Apparently they found human art fascinating, in the same way one might find a child's crayon drawing endearing. The irony wasn't lost on Zara that these same primitives had developed faster than light travel, while the Veltani were still figuring out fire. Around her, the station's alien personnel went about their daily routines with the sort of self-importance that comes from belonging to advanced civilizations. The Zentari strutted past in their elaborate military dress, their scaled hides gleaming under the artificial lighting. The Kethmori glided through the corridors with their characteristic air of intellectual superiority, their translucent heads pulsing with bioluminescent thoughts that were, presumably, far too sophisticated for human comprehension. It was all very impressive, if you ignored the fact that this entire station was protected by a human-designed defense grid, powered by human-engineered fusion reactors, and maintained by human-built automated systems. But pointing that out would be impolite, and humans were trying very hard to be polite these days. Zara's workstation chimed softly, displaying an incoming message from Director Quintel, the station's Veltani administrator. The message was typically bureaucratic. Cultural Liaison Kellick, please prepare briefing materials for incoming Zenthari delegation. Commander Vexthul Cardane arrives today for security consultations. She almost laughed out loud. Security consultations. The Zenthari were about as qualified to discuss station security as a goldfish was to perform brain surgery. But they had pretty scales and an impressive military tradition that involved a lot of ceremonial posturing. Their actual combat record against anything more dangerous than space pirates was, to put it diplomatically, limited. The Zenthari had built their reputation on conquering primitive worlds and bullying species that hadn't yet developed space travel. They were the galactic equivalent of the school bully who only picked fights with kids half their size, then bragged about their warrior culture to anyone who would listen. The consortium loved them because they provided muscle, without asking awkward questions about where their orders came from. Zara pulled up Commander Cardane's file, which read like a masterpiece of military fiction. Decorated war hero, skilled tactician, veteran of 17 campaigns. What the file didn't mention was that 16 of those campaigns had been against Stone Age civilizations, and the 17th had ended with him retreating from a single human patrol ship that had wandered into Zenthari space by accident. Still, he was arriving with full honors, because the consortium believed in maintaining appearances. There would be speeches about cooperation and mutual respect, followed by private meetings where the Zenthari would nod along to human military briefings, while secretly planning to ignore everything they'd been told. The morning dragged on with typical bureaucratic tedium. Zara processed cultural exchange requests, updated translation protocols, and pretended not to notice when passing aliens made comments about human savagery in languages they assumed she couldn't understand. She spoke 17 galactic languages fluently, but letting people think she was just another dumb human had its advantages. Around midday, the station's announcement system crackled to life, with Director Quintel's voice. All personnel please welcome Commander Vexthul Cardane and his delegation from the Zenthari Military Council. The commander will be conducting security assessments throughout the station. Zara didn't look up from her work. Security assessments from the Zenthari were about as useful as fashion advice from a black hole. But the consortium insisted on including them in station operations. It was all part of the elaborate theater that kept the galactic peace intact, even if that peace was built on a foundation of mutual deception and carefully managed ignorance. The Cultural Liaison Office occupied a quiet corner of the station's administrative section, far from the main thoroughfares where important people conducted important business. It was the perfect place for someone who preferred to be overlooked, which made it unfortunate when Commander Cardane and his entourage decided to conduct their security assessment in her direction. She heard them before she saw them, the distinctive click of Zenthari military boots on polished floor plates, accompanied by the kind of loud conversation that suggested they wanted everyone to know how important they were. The commander's voice carried clearly through the corridor, discussing human deficiencies with the sort of casual authority that came from never having been contradicted. "The humans are a security risk," Cardane was saying to his aide, a smaller Zenthari who nodded enthusiastically at everything his superior said. "Primitive, unpredictable, prone to violence. The consortium should reconsider allowing them on stations like this." Zara continued typing, her fingers moving steadily across the holographic interface. The trade agreement she was reviewing had a particularly amusing clause about cultural sensitivity requirements that she was translating into something the Veltani would actually understand. The clicking of boots stopped outside her office. Through her peripheral vision, she could see the commander's massive frame filling the doorway, his aide hovering nervously behind him. Cardane stood nearly 3 meters tall, his scaled hide bearing the ritual scars of a Zenthari warrior, his military uniform decorated with enough medals to outfit a small army. "You," he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to immediate obedience. "Human." Zara didn't look up. The trade agreement's subsection on mutually beneficial cultural exchange was particularly entertaining. Apparently, the Veltani considered human music to be an interesting form of organized noise. "I am speaking to you, human," Cardane repeated, his tone sharpening. "You will acknowledge my presence." She reached for her coffee mug, a ceramic piece decorated with the logo of the Terran Space Marine Corps. The logo was faded now, worn by years of use, but still visible enough to make her smile. She took a sip and continued reading. The commander's aide whispered something urgent in Zenthari, probably advising caution, but Cardane ignored him. He stepped into the office, his presence filling the small space like a storm cloud. Other aliens in the corridor had stopped to watch, their expressions ranging from curiosity to concern. "I have heard disturbing reports about human behavior on this station," Cardane announced, his voice loud enough to carry throughout the administrative section. "Insubordination, disrespect for authority, failure to observe proper protocols." Zara highlighted a particularly absurd clause in the trade agreement and made a note in the margin. The Veltani wanted to import human, recreational pharmaceuticals, apparently unaware that they were referring to coffee and aspirin. "Look at me when I speak to you," the commander demanded, moving closer to her workstation. "I am Commander Vexthul Cardane of the Zenthari Military Council. I demand your respect." The office had gone completely quiet. Even the station's ambient hum seemed muted, as if the machinery itself was holding its breath. Zara could feel the weight of multiple gazes, aliens throughout the corridor watching to see how this confrontation would unfold. She saved her work and reached for her coffee again. Cardane's scaled features darkened with rage. "You dare ignore me? Do you know who I am? I have conquered 17 worlds, commanded fleets of warships, brought entire civilizations to their knees. I am a warrior born, a leader of warriors, and you are nothing but a primitive savage from a backward world." Zara scrolled down to the next section of the trade agreement. The Veltani had requested samples of human emotional expression, which was their polite way of asking for soap operas and reality TV shows. She made a note to include some of the more ridiculous dating shows. The Veltani would probably find them anthropologically fascinating. "I could kill you where you sit," Cardane continued, his voice rising to a bellow that echoed through the corridor. "Your pathetic species thinks it belongs among the stars, but you are nothing but animals pretending to be civilized. You have no honor, no discipline, no understanding of what it means to be a true warrior." The commander's aide was practically vibrating with anxiety now, clearly recognizing that his superior was heading into dangerous territory. Other aliens in the corridor had begun backing away, their instincts warning them that something was about to go very wrong. Zara finished reading the emotional expression clause and moved on to the next section. This one dealt with technological curiosities, which apparently included human weapons. The Veltani were particularly interested in something called kinetic projectile accelerators, which was their fancy term for guns. She wondered if they realized that the primitive humans had developed weapons technology that could punch through Zenthari military armor like tissue paper. "Are you listening to me?" Cardane roared, slamming his fist on her desk hard enough to make the coffee mug jump. "I am trying to educate you about your place in the galaxy, and you sit there like a mindless beast, too stupid to comprehend the honor I do you by acknowledging your existence." The mug settled back into its original position without spilling a drop. Zara appreciated good engineering, even in something as simple as furniture stabilization systems. "Perhaps," the commander said, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper, "you need a more direct lesson in respect. I have seen human females before, in the conquest records of my people. You are all the same, weak, helpless, dependent on your males for protection. But there are no human males here to protect you, are there?" He leaned closer, his massive frame looming over her workstation. "I think I will teach you what happens to insolent animals who forget their place. First, I will break your fingers one by one until you beg for mercy. Then I will—" The crack of breaking bone echoed through the corridor like a gunshot. Commander Vexthul Cardane, decorated war hero and veteran of 17 campaigns, found himself lying on the floor with his spine snapped in 3 places, staring up at the ceiling while his brain tried to process what had just happened. The last thing he remembered clearly was beginning to describe his educational plans for the human female. Now he was paralyzed from the neck down, and the human was still sitting at her workstation, calmly reading her trade agreement. Zara hadn't even looked up. One moment she'd been reviewing the technological curiosity section, and the next she'd simply reached out and grabbed the commander's head, twisting it with the sort of casual efficiency usually reserved for opening stubborn jar lids. The movement had been so smooth, so completely without effort, that several witnesses would later swear they'd imagined it. "Excuse me," she said politely, addressing the commander's aide, who was staring at his superior's motionless form with the expression of someone whose worldview had just been shattered. "Could you call medical? I think your boss slipped." The aide's mouth opened and closed several times without producing sound. Other aliens in the corridor stood frozen, their sophisticated brains struggling to reconcile what they'd just witnessed with their understanding of human capabilities. "Also," Zara continued, still not looking up from her work, "you might want to contact station security. I believe assault is still against regulations, even for decorated war heroes." Station security arrived within minutes, led by Captain Morgan, a grizzled Veltani who'd been running security on Nexus Prime for over a decade. He took one look at the paralyzed commander and the calmly working human, and his expression shifted from concern to recognition. "Kellic," he said, using her surname with the sort of respectful tone usually reserved for dangerous explosives. "Incident report." "Commander Cardane was making threats," Zara replied, finally looking up from her workstation. "He became physical. I defended myself." "Defended yourself?" The commander's aide had finally found his voice, though it came out as a high-pitched squeak. "You broke his spine. How is that self-defense?" Zara blinked at him with the innocent expression of someone who'd never hurt a fly. "He was much bigger than me. I felt threatened." Captain Morgan was already accessing his security files, his elongated fingers dancing across a holographic interface. "Kellowick, Zara, Terran Integration Specialist." He paused, his eyes widening slightly. "Previous assignment: Terran Space Marine Corps 15th Assault Battalion, service record, classified, combat deployment, classified." The corridor had gone dead silent. "Current assignment," Morgan continued, his voice carefully neutral. "Cultural Liaison Office, Security Clearance Level 9, Special Authorization Armed Response Protocols." The aide's scales had gone pale. "Armed Response Protocols? But she's just a cultural liaison." "The Cultural Liaison Office," Morgan explained patiently, "is responsible for human integration and cultural exchange programs. It also serves as the primary interface between human military advisors and station security. Specialist Kellic is our human military consultant." "Military consultant?" The aide's voice was barely a whisper now. "The consortium hired humans to design our defense systems," Morgan said, as if explaining something to a particularly slow child. "Who did you think we got to explain how they work?" Director Quintel arrived just as the medical team was loading Commander Cardane onto a gravity stretcher. The Veltani administrator took one look at the scene and sighed deeply. "Zara," he said, his tone carrying the weary resignation of someone who dealt with this before, Please tell me you didn't break another one. Else was being rude, Zara replied, as if this explained everything. How rude? He threatened to break my fingers and then implied he was going to sexually assault me. Quintel's expression darkened. I see. Medical assessment. Complete spinal separation at the C3, T6 and L2 vertebrae, the medical technician reported. He'll live, but he'll never walk again, or move his arms, or control his bodily functions. Ah, Quintel said. The standard human response to sexual threats, then. Very restrained of you, Zara. The aide was looking back and forth between them as if they were speaking an alien language. Restrained, she crippled him. She could have killed him, Quintel pointed out reasonably. Humans have this peculiar custom of responding to threats of sexual violence with extreme prejudice. Something about evolutionary psychology and protective instincts. Very fascinating from an anthropological perspective. But he's a decorated war hero, a veteran of 17 campaigns. Against Stone Age civilizations, Zara said mildly. I checked his file. Very impressive record of beating up primitives who didn't have space travel. The Zenthari are a warrior race, the aide protested. So are humans, Quintel replied. The difference is that humans fight wars against things that can fight back. As the medical team carried the commander away, Zara returned to her trade agreement. The technological curiosities section was actually quite interesting. The Veltani had requested detailed specifications for human defensive implements, apparently unaware that they were asking for blueprints to weapon systems that could level continents. The corridor gradually returned to normal, though she noticed that aliens now gave her workstation a much wider berth. Word would spread quickly through the station's rumor network, as it always did when humans reminded the galaxy what they were actually capable of. The amusing part was that the consortium had specifically requested human military advisors because they wanted to understand human combat capabilities. They'd just never bothered to ask whether their cultural liaison might be one of those advisors. The job description had been very clear: facilitate human integration into galactic society. It just hadn't mentioned that sometimes integration required breaking the spines of people who got too aggressive about their superiority complexes. Zara finished her coffee and reached for her files. Tomorrow's schedule included a meeting with the Kethmori Trade Council, who wanted to discuss human behavioral patterns in their commercial districts. Apparently they were having trouble with human shoppers who kept ignoring their caste-based shopping restrictions. She made a note to prepare a presentation on human social equality principles. It would be educational for everyone involved. The workstation chimed with an incoming message from Director Quintel. Excellent work today, Zara. Please prepare a report on human defensive responses for the Zenthari delegation. They've requested cultural sensitivity training. She smiled and began typing. The report would be very thorough, covering everything from human concepts of proportional response to the evolutionary psychology behind protective instincts. She'd include several case studies of what happened when various alien species had underestimated human capabilities. The Zenthari delegation would find it very educational. Outside her office, the station hummed with its usual activity. Aliens went about their daily routines, secure in their knowledge that they lived in a civilized galaxy where primitive species like humans were kept safely in their place. The irony of their situation, that their advanced civilization was protected by the same primitives they looked down upon, was apparently too subtle for most of them to grasp. But then, that was the beauty of being underestimated. Nobody expected the cultural liaison to be a former assault marine with 17 confirmed kills and a specialty in close-quarters combat. They saw the job title and assumed she spent her days organizing cultural festivals and translating recipe cards. The truth was far more interesting and far more dangerous than any of them realized. Zara Kellick, Terran integration specialist, returned to her paperwork with a satisfied smile. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities for cultural exchange, and quite possibly new aliens who needed to learn about human concepts of personal space and appropriate behavior. She was looking forward to it.